All right. I'm an amateur. I won't even call myself a scientist, but I spent a lot of time in the field. And because the talks so far that I've heard have talked very little about the coastal domain, that's me. I spent all of my time on the coast. Lots and lots of field trips, and I've got 15 years of experience of running around behind Katipo, and in the meantime I see a lot of things besides Katipo. So. All right. I've seen reference to this document beforehand, and rightly so. The PCE's done some pretty impressive work, and in my opinion, that was really the thing that he started to make his mark with. And Landcare Research says this is the finest thing to put in front of the Parliament. And how do we get this taken seriously? That's my question to us as a group. And as I've been insinuating, as valuable as his piece of work is, and I've mentioned this to him as he admitted it was the case, it says nothing about the coastal domain. So I can't speak for the whole country, but I can speak for about 50 kilometers of coast. All right, so one of the things the PCE told me in reviewing this for me was that I really have to be very familiar with what Landcare Research is doing. So that was part of the background work for this. And their list is extensive, but it doesn't really apply completely very well in the coastal domain. So the only one that's a real big red flag is the coastal wattle, and I have to say Craig's done heaps of work around getting that solution kicked off the ground. The other stuff, the sea spurge, okay, that's I don't see that. Well, you'll see later on my list of problem weeds. I think the sea spurge situation is probably as well managed as we're going to find in the near-term future. And loose strife for me personally is a fairly localized problem. It doesn't mean it's not a problem. Gorse is, yeah. What do you say about gorse? I mean, it's a national problem, but it's not in my top 5 or 10 list. So that's. And there are definitely some other ones. Japanese honeysuckle I can jump up and down about, but it's fairly localized in most cases. And thistles are everywhere, just like dandelions. So. Okay, so I come from a background of leaning pretty heavily on iNaturalist. Since I don't have any corporate databases behind me, I use iNaturalist as mine, and I do my best to use what I can out of it. And so that map you're seeing here is the 50 kilometers of coast that I covered fairly regularly, and it's giving you some sort of indication of my coverage in the area. It happens that I have a Ramsar site right smack in the middle of that, so the big green site, the green blob in the middle is around the Ramsar site, because that's just got that much more attention from the wider agencies, I guess. But the way for me to cull data out of iNaturalist doesn't work very effectively, which is what this slide demonstrates. So let's move on to something that maybe makes a bit more sense. In iNaturalist, the bottom human pressure map reflects very amazingly to the amount of data that's been collected by iNaturalist around the country. It's a natural consequence. People live there. You look in your backyard first, and that's fair enough. But the pest plants project that Colin Work started, as you saw from the previous slide, doesn't really have all that much data in it, and so I was extrapolating on what would happen if we could get the professional data integrated with that, and what kind of numbers would start to make some sort of statistically meaningful sense. And I can't remember where I sucked that number from, but it's a fairly logically extracted on a thumb suck. So how do we do this in terms of integrating the professional databases with iNaturalist, or vice versa, or we come back to that subject. In any case, between now and then, from having spent 9 years of wandering this coast and recording it fairly routinely, ever more detail as time goes by, here's my idea of what some thumbsuck looks like. Okay, the top 5, and I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument from Craig on this one. Coastal wattle is the elephant in the room. As so many, the next slide will show you a really graphic example of that. This one happens to see a lot of tree lupin, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is right near enough top at one equal. And marram grass has been the long-standing problem since forever. And pampas grasses and sea figs are stuff I see all the time. So it's and everywhere basically across my 50 kilometers. So as I say, the coastal wattle is a very graphic problem for us. This is the south bank of the Manawatu estuary. This is the south bank of the Ramsar site. And it's basically wall-to-wall wattle for about 1.5 kilometers and 50 meters back into the pine forest, which is no joy either. Okay, so, but in addition to that, okay, in this case I'll start with the xeric dunes because that's the simplest one to define, and in some respects it's got the least threatened species. So when I talk about Ote Taranga and Tatara, Heki and Pinga and Katipo and the common skink, that's a fairly short list. And in actual fact, on our particular coast, they're doing reasonably well. Anybody else in the country should be the envy of our Ote Taranga. We really have some amazing stuff. But there's a bunch of other dishonorable mentions which are dealt regularly with by some of our community members along this coast, and some of those will be familiar ones with you. The boxthorn, I'm certain anybody who's working in the agricultural domain will have met boxthorn regularly. But the little ones are going to be a little bit more less obvious. The Trifolium arvense, the hairy. And anyway, it's in the sand dunes. It's cover stuff, and the way the plants have evolved, the native plants have evolved in the dunes is they learn to accommodate the moving sand. And this stuff does the opposite of that, stabilizes it, and that's just basically changing the ecology completely. And that's to some degree a little bit like that with the fleabanes. And one that really, I'm not sure why it's not getting much attention is ripgut brome, because the impact isn't on so much on the ecology as that should be more visible to the agricultural sector. It doesn't get its name for nothing. That's from the livestock, right? I just don't know where that stands in the bigger picture. Okay. And curiously enough, DOC and other agencies really jump up and down about pink ragwort, but we have a bigger problem with the red-purple ragwort on this particular coast. Okay, and dune wetlands change the picture quite heavily because the biodiversity changes. I mean, the xeric dunes, if I try really, really hard, I can find 12 native species in the xeric dunes. But when you get into the dune wetlands, all of a sudden, the number multiplies and the number of threatened species multiplies. The plant species in particular, they thrive on the very difficult circumstances of lots of water in winter and very dry in summer. And there's a whole lot of really special things in there. So I'm quite happy to show you that. I won't be able to show you all of those in the dune garden tomorrow, but certainly a portion of them are there. And there's another set of dishonorable mentions that go with the wetlands, and Juncus acutus is right up there. Sharpbush, anyway, I'm not sure if how familiar you are with those unless you're working in the wetlands fairly regularly. And another one that's very much like the clover I was talking about before is the strawberry clover here. It doesn't grow very tall, but the wee herbs that we're talking about in these wetlands don't even grow that tall, so the strawberry clover overgrows it, and it does it on fairly large scales, like significant percentages of some of the wetlands I'm looking at regularly. So, and I put at the bottom 2 native species in the context of succession. I mean, succession is a natural thing, but there's some fairly dramatic history around oi in particular, basically taking over some of these dune wetlands, and these little herbs are gone. So you've got lots of stories around Whanganui from Colin Ovo about that stuff, right? So. Okay, and the estuary stuff, again, there's quite a lot more species, and the list goes on a lot longer if I start putting up all the bird species, okay? You can't really peg all of those for the Manawatu estuary in the context that some of those birds will come and go seasonally, and so they're not all at home there all the time, but still it's a very long list. And I still label the same 5, and the one that's perhaps not necessarily widely recognized as tall fescue, the grass that grows half-meter tall spherical clumps and basically just overgrows anything that's growing anywhere near there. And there are significant portions of the Manawatu estuary fernbird flat covered in stuff like that, and it's basically killed off all the native species in there. And Juncus acutus remains, between the two of them, they're the two biggest problems by far in the Manawatu estuary. The other ones are little smaller ones, and the Atriplex prostrata is a weedy saltbush, and we have a native saltbush in the estuary as well, which this weedy one happens to outnumber by an order of magnitude, which is a bit of a bummer. Okay, so what's the biocontrol potential for these things? I'm doing a thumb suck here, but I mean, obviously the context of coastal wattle. I could give you some hearsay from Craig, but maybe I should let Craig give you the word. My hearsay is that the test site at Whanganui is doing really well, and there's one other test site which is not doing quite so well. Okay. That's fine. All right. But the one that's got no biocontrol active that I'm aware of, it really would. The tree lupin is a serious problem, and I just wonder how much we can do about investigating some of these things here. I'm very aware of from the Landcare research work stuff on gorse, for instance. They've thrown 4 solutions at it and nothing's flown. So I mean, how much money do you throw at these kinds of problems? But I mean, lupin's a really big problem in the coastal domain, and it's probably not just the coastal domain. I see it along the highways everywhere too. So anyway, I'm happy to say in the context of marram grass that Horizons as a regional council, it's not on the RPMP, but they're making quite a lot of effort around it. So there's some experiments around a pilot program in the dune garden at the estuary, and there's another similar sort of program at Cuckoo Beach to the south, all of which has got a fairly big focus on the marram grass, and that's a good thing from my perspective. I don't know really what to say about the sea figs. Pampas grass, I've seen it handled in some places, but some of the down at Waikawa Beach, just masses of it in some places. It's bulldozer material. Okay, that's sort of the end of my thumb suck, and I'll throw up a slide. I have Craig's given me a reputation here for knowing about sea spurge, and it was just sheer good luck. Is good luck the right word? That I happened to be in the right place at the right time. So those are the spots where it's been found in this country, and there was a dozen of them on this coast, and I happened to find 8 of them first. But that's because I'm on the dunes a lot, right? So, and there's a second reason. Sea spurge appears in the same places that katipo appears, and my prime focus is katipo. So, but it's the display out in the room out there in the cafeteria, right? Okay, so the reason I put this up is because it's only just fairly recently clicked that the miti outbreak of the sea spurge in the far north. How much can we be blaming that on the fact that the sea spurge has got as far as Lord Howe Island, and do we need to be making efforts to eradicate it on Lord Howe Island to save ourselves the trouble? I've asked that question, and Abby's forwarded on to NPI. I haven't heard anything yet, so. Another minor one. Okay, the 2 little anecdotes here. The little flower, or the little plant, was a bit of a shock and a surprise. We've been working by some thumbnail ideas on how fast sea spurge can go to flower, and this particular one surprised me by it's flowering at a very small height and in less than 6 weeks. So that was a little bit of a fright for our understanding of how fast these problems can be replicating themselves. And the other one is, it's always irritated me that euphorbia related stuff. If you got a problem with euphorbia, they say just call the hospital, call the health line. And what they're not telling you is the stuff is extremely alkaline. And most of you are going to be educated enough what that means. So if you get yourself a little bit of dilute vinegar and you wash your hands in it, that problem's gone. You're not going to get it in your eyes anymore. They don't tell you that. But anyway, that's just me being a cowboy. Okay, pest animals. Some of these are going to be very familiar ones. I was down at the rabbit sessions to listen how they're dealing with it, and it's a difficult problem. And I'm going to go talk to the Cape Sanctuary guy again because they've thrown a lot of money at it and seem to have done something about it. So I'm not sure it's applicable for us, but we have to ask the question. And the dishonorable mentions. You may not be familiar with sambar deer, but I see their tracks all over the place, and they're evidence of the stuff they're chewing on. They're not supposed to be. And at the bottom two, first of all, I'll ask you how many of you know what a city-mounted trapezia is? Lots of hands up. Okay, we better clarify it, huh? I told you I love katipo.
Probably got a minute, 2 minutes, maybe.
Okay. So that's why that one is, and it's an unrecognized problem. Our katipo population is definitely suffering from this. I'll move on. You can ask me about that after. Okay, and how do we deal with that? Okay, redback is being handled in Otago in a way with pheromones, and it's entirely plausible to my mind that this could be used for the same thing. Okay, those posters are on display out there, so I'm not going to talk about them. You can come and talk to me out there. And what we're doing locally, okay, that just gives you an idea. You'll see some of that tomorrow when you come to visit, assuming you're coming to visit. It's all about the awareness, right? And that's tomorrow. Okay, and I'm quite happy to give this out if you want to know where my references are coming from. And lastly, one more. This is the topic I really wanted to hammer home, but it's been hammered home several times already. The fact that we need some data integration, data federation. And that's really the thing I wanted to talk about in order to make my cowboy tactics more effective. That's all I've got to say.